Hello everybody, welcome to this instruction video. This video I'd like to show you how to make week 11 of the Crochet Along Last Dance on the Beach by Scheepjes. The square for this week is designed by Annelies from Vicarno and in loving memory of Marinka. The square has a beautiful texture and I'll be showing you how to make this square this week just like I've done before. The yarn you'll be using either Color Crafter or Merino Soft. Please check the pattern for exactly which color you need. This week, if you have the dance in the C packet like I have, this kit you'll need the dark blue yarn, but this yarn is actually too dark for video because you won't really be able to see the stitches that I'm making, so I'll be using a different color to actually do the video instruction for you. I have used a 4mm hook for my Color Crafter and a 4.5mm for my Merino Soft squares. And this is the same hook size that I used for my gauge swatch. But then again, maybe you need a different hook size altogether. I'll again take you step by step through the rows for this week. It's a pattern of 4 rows that we'll be repeating, and it's a great pattern and I really love the texture. With a slip knot on your hook, going to chain 32. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 31 and 32. We're going to skip the first chain from the hook and in the second chain make a double crochet. Like so. Now we're going to start our small repeat unit that we're going to be doing until the end of the chain. Start with a chain 3, 2, 3. Going to skip 2 stitches, so 2 chain stitches. So this is a stitch worked in, so 1, 2 skip, and in the third stitch you're going to do a bobble, and that's basically a 3 trebles together, chain 1, and again 3 trebles together. So we're going to skip 1, 2 stitches in the third chain stitch. Going to do 3 the first bits of a treble. So this is basically a treble 3 together. And again. You now have 4 loops on your hook and you're going to take them all off. Chain 1, and we're doing again a cluster in the same stitch. I'll just zoom in a little bit more for you. Yarn over, so we're doing a treble, but only the first bit. And you're going to do this for 3 legs. That was 1, 2, and 3. You can have 4 loops on your hook and take them all off in one go. You did all of that in the same stitch, so your stitch opens up quite considerably. Don't worry about this. When you're doing the border you can nicely take this together. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Going to skip 2 stitches again. So that was the last stitch worked. So skip 1, 2 stitches. In the third stitch you do a double crochet. And that's your little repeat unit there. You're going to do that in total 5 times. I'll show you again. So again, chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Going to skip 2 stitches and then work a bobble again. So let's skip 1, 2 stitches and then work a bobble. So that's a treble 3 together, chain 1, and again a treble 3 together. So those 2 clusters, and 3. So you've done 3 times the first half of a treble. Then you take them all off. Chain 1, and in the same stitch again work that little cluster of 3 trebles. It's 1, 2, 3, and take them all off. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3, skip 2 stitches, that's 1, 2 stitches skip, and in the third stitch you do a double crochet again. So now you have 2 of these bobbles. I'll show you one more time and then I'll see you at the end of the row. So chain 3, skip 2 stitches, and then we work a bobble again. So skip 1, 2 stitches, and in the third chain you work a bobble. So that's a cluster of these 3 trebles you work together. Pull them through, chain 1, and again a cluster of 3 trebles that you work together. All in the same stitch, this entire bobble, everything in the same stitch. 3, and take them all off. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and skip 2 stitches again. So that's 1, 2 skip, and in the third you work a double crochet again. So you've now done 3 repeats. Going to do 2 more to get to the end of your chain. When you've done all your repeats, your last double crochet is in that very first chain stitch, so this fits exactly. If something went wrong, you either have a stitch too many or too few. You most probably didn't skip the correct number of stitches in between. So at this point you have 5 bobbles, and in the next rows 2, 3, 4 and 5 we're actually going to be doing the repeat of the pattern. So row 1 is like a base round, and now we can start building the pattern. Row 2, do a chain 1, turn your work. I'm going to work a double crochet in the first stitch because this chain 1 does not count as a stitch. So in that very first stitch there you work a double crochet. And work 3 double crochets in every chain 3 space. So that's 1, 2, 3 double crochets. Just a note, we're now going to skip the bobble itself and go to the next chain 3 space. And you can do this in 2 ways, but one way is wrong and one way is right. That's often how it is. This bobble, you want to work it like this, that the bobble is away from you. The reason is that the other side, so the side that's facing you at the moment, is the wrong side of your work. So if you work the double crochets like this, that you have the bobble facing you while you're doing your double crochets, you actually have them all popping the wrong way. So what you want to make sure is that your bobble is the other way while you're doing your chain 3 double crochets, because that way they're popping in the right direction. Otherwise you're going to be at the end of the square and you're going to have to force all your bobbles to go the other way, and that's quite a tedious job. So save yourself all that energy and make sure your bobbles are facing away from you when you're doing your 3 double crochets in the chain space. And what you'll see I'm doing is I'm working only in the chain space. So the bobble itself you skip, as well as the double crochets that you have in between here. You also skip those. You only work in the chain space. And you work 3 double crochets in every space. And these double crochets basically form your pattern. They help your bobble to come together, and they shape your square, these 3 double crochets. And row 2 is also a row that you're going to be repeating after every pattern row. So you're doing a row with bobbles, and then you're doing a row with double crochets. And that's how you're going to be alternating this square. And when we're a bit further along, I'll also be checking for size, because at this point I feel there's just not enough square yet to really check for size. So I'm just going to do that a little bit later. But if you want to, you can already put this on your gauge swatch and just check how you are for gauge. But I'm just going to wait a little longer. So 3 double crochets in my last space, and then you still have 1 stitch left here, this very first double crochet. You should also work a double crochet on that stitch, like so. If you now turn your work forward, so that's the other way, you can see these bobbles you have here are nicely popping, and in between you have these beautiful little arcs, and this in essence is what you're going to be making. We're just going to be alternating the position of the bobbles. Row 3, start with a chain 2, and this is already the first bit of your cluster, because we're now going to do a chain a 3 cluster, and this chain 2 is already your first leg. So in the very first stitch we're going to be completing the cluster. So yarn over and insert into that very first stitch and take off 2 loops. So that's the first bit of the cluster, and we do that again and take it off. You now have 3 loops on your hook and take them all off. So that's your first cluster worked. Chain 3, 2, 3. I'm going to skip 2 stitches, and then we work a double crochet. So skip 1, 2 stitches, and then in the next stitch, which should be above your bobble, going to work a double crochet. Again, chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Skip 2 stitches, so that's 1, 2 stitches, and your next stitch, which should be above your double crochet here, going to work a bobble. So that's again yarn over for the first cluster. So again doing 3-legged cluster, so a treble 3 together, and take them all off. Chain 1, and we do it again. So in the same stitch work another cluster. So always taking off the first 2 loops, 4 loops on your hook, take them all off. Chain 3, 2, 3, skip 2 stitches and work a double crochet in the third. Like so. And what you see here happening is that you've made a bobble above a space below here, so that's above the double crochet, and your double crochet is now above the bobble. That was 2 rows down. So that way you're going to be alternating your pattern. So now again a chain 3 and a bobble, chain 3 and a double crochet, bobble, double crochet. So that way make sure your pattern is always alternating. If you suddenly have 2 bobbles above one another, you know something went wrong somewhere. You must probably forgot to do a double crochet, or you made 2 double crochets after one another instead of a bobble and then a double crochet. So those are the type of mistakes that are easy to make. But once you get into the rhythm of this square, how the bobble and the double crochets are alternating, you'll get into this real quick. So that's again a chain 1 and then a bobble again. Oh, sorry, a cluster. So the 2 clusters together, they make up the bobble, of course. And take them all off. Chain 3. These chain stitches also help to group your cluster together. Skip 2 stitches, and then again immediately above the bobble again you do a double crochet. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Skip 1, 2 stitches, and then again work a cluster in the 1 stitch, take all off, all your 4 loops, chain 1, and again a cluster in the same stitch. In this row you're going to have 4 bobbles and 2 clusters. So we're almost to the end. We're going to repeating this, and then just at the end we're going to do something a little different. So still have a double crochet above the bobble here, chain 3. We need to work 1 more my yarn is getting twisted. There we go. One more cluster, chain 1 and a cluster here, so that's a bobble, of course. In that last position, chain 1 and then work another cluster and 3, take them all off, 1, 2, 3, skip 1, 2 stitches again, and in the third you work a double crochet. Now, and then just for the end, at this point you will have 4 stitches left. Going to do a chain 3 again, skip 2 stitches, that's 1, 2 skip, and in the third stitch you work a cluster only, so that's only the 3 legs of the treble that you're going to work together, and take them all off. You have 1 stitch left here, that last double crochet. You're going to leave that stitch unworked. So this is the end of row 3, and then in row 4 we're going to tie them all together again. Row 4, which is exactly the same as row 2, chain 1, which does not count as a stitch, and turn your work again. In the first stitch, that's the stitch here, that's on your cluster, work a double crochet. In the chain 3 space, again work 3 double crochets, and you're going to repeat exactly what you've done below. So in every chain 3 space you work 3 double crochets. So this double crochet here, you're again skipping, and only in the spaces you work 3 double crochets. Now you're onto a bobble again, and again make sure it goes the other way when you're working this. So make sure that it's popping away from you, because that's the front of your work. And then work 3 double crochets in every stitch. Sorry, every space. Not every stitch, because if you work double crochets also on the bobbles or on the double crochet that you have in between here, you're going to have way too many stitches, and then your work will just not be square. You'll end up with a trapezium of some sorts. So if your shape goes wrong, it could well be that you've worked too many double crochets. So every time make sure you're popping that way and not this way, so away from you. And when we're at the end of this row, it's also a good moment to check how we are for size with our gauge swatch, because we now have at least a few rows of the pattern already. And the last one, like so, and your last chain space. Do 3 double crochets in that last chain 3 space, and you have 1 stitch left, that's the cluster here. You're also going to work a double crochet on that last stitch. And then this is what our work looks like at the moment. You can see how it's alternating these bobbles. So if they're above one another, you know something went wrong somewhere. You want them alternating. And this is also a good moment to check for size. So let's just take a moment to check for size. We're now at the end of a substantial piece. If I put this on my gauge swatch, you're going to have to pull it a little bit, because this work still curls, because it's not blocked, and just the design makes it curl a little bit. But if you stretch it out nice and flat, you see, oh, this fits really well. You see on both sides you've got a little bit of room still for the border. Well, this is fine. I'm really happy with this, so I'm going to continue with this hook size for this pattern. Row 5, which is the last row of the pattern repeat, is very similar to row 1. I'm going to start with the chain 1, which does not count as a stitch, and turn your work. You now have the front of your work facing. In the first stitch, you do a double crochet in that first stitch. Chain 3, skip 2 stitches, and then we work a bobble. So skip 1, 2 stitches, and in the third you work a bobble, and that is again above the double crochet that you have below, 2 rows down. So that way you're again getting the alternating pattern that you need for this square. Chain 1 and then the second half of the bobble. Always take off 2 loops at a time. Now you have 4 loops on your hook and you're taking all of them off. Chain 3, skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, and in the third stitch that's above your cluster here, you work a double crochet. And this little unit you're again going to repeat all the way to the end. I'll show you one more repeat. Chain 3, skip 2 stitches, that's 1, 2, skip, and the third you make a cluster again. So that's 3 legs, you take them all off. Chain 1, and now we do the second cluster in the same space, and those 2 clusters together, they make the bobble. 3, and take them all off. Chain 3, skip 1, 2 stitches, and in the third you make a double crochet again. You've now done this 2 times, you're going to repeat this until you get to the end. Almost to the end, chain 3, skip 1, 2 stitches, and on your last stitch, that's this stitch here, this double crochet, you do your last double crochet, like so. And now you've done the entire pattern repeat, so 2, 3, 4 and 5, they make up your repeat unit, and you're going to repeat 2, 3, 4 and 5 until you've completed your square. However, we're going to show you row 6 again, which is basically the repeat of row 2, and which is the start of your next pattern repeat, because that just brings your bobbles nicely together. So again, chain 1. Chain 1 does not count as a stitch. So in the first double crochet, you again do a double crochet, and then work 1 in every chain space. You work 3 double crochets. Make sure your bobbles pointing away from you when you make your 3 double crochets. And like I said before, only in the chain spaces, so not in the bobble itself or in the double crochet that's in between your bobbles. And then you're going to repeat rows 2, 3, 4 and 5 until your square is big enough. 3 and 1, 2, 3, almost there. You'll find that rows 2, the repeat of row 2 goes fast, and that when you're working your rows with bobbles, you'll just have to pay a little bit more attention to make sure that you do them correctly. But these rows of double crochets where you tie them all together, they go nice and fast. So almost to the end. I might be going a little fast for you, but I'm sure you have the hang of this by now. So 3 double crochets, and then on your last stitch, that's this stitch here, that last double crochet, you also work a double crochet. Turn your work to the front. This is what it looks like at the moment. You can really see the pattern repeats in there quite nicely. And this is what you're now going to be repeating until your square is big enough. Just a few words on the number of rows you're going to be repeating. You repeat rows 2, 3, 4 and 5 until your square is large enough, high, and with high enough, that can be either at 22 or 24 rows. And that basically comes down to having 11 rows of bobbles or having 12 rows. I've now got 3 here, and when you work in the height direction, you'll notice that some of you will only need to work 11 rows of bobbles and some 12. And the reason for this is just the way you work the bobbles, how high your stitches are, and it has nothing to do with what is wrong or what is right. We just noticed that during testing that some people needed 11 and some needed 12 rows. So either work 22 or 24 pattern rows and check for size which one you need, and don't worry if you need one less or one more. That all has to do with your personal tension, your personal style of crochet. So continue, repeat 2, 3, 4 and 5 until you have 22 or 24 rows. I've now done 22 rows of the pattern and I'd like to check for gauge. So I'm going to put my square on my gauge swatch. And what you see is that actually I am perfect on size. So what I've done is I've stopped 2 rows earlier. I only had to work 22 rows, but maybe you do have to work 24 rows. This depends on your own style. How do you crochet? So I've stopped early, only on 22 rows, but maybe you do 24. What's important here is that you have a good fit on your gauge swatch. You still need to do the border, of course, and that's exactly the same as all the weeks we've done before. Along each edge you do 26 double crochets, and in the corner you do 3. Mark your center corner double crochet. So 26 on every edge and 3 in the corner. And when you're done, do block your square, because you can see it just wobbles a little bit, and blocking makes it nice and perfect. And when you're done, your square looks like this. I really love the texture of this square. It'll feel just great on our blanket. You're going to need 4 of these for this week, so make all 4. And when you're ready, we can go on to next week, week 12, and we'll be doing the last square of the blanket before we can start actually assembling it.